Hey all, and welcome to my vlog. My name is Erin, and this week we are going to talk about how to maintain discipline, motivation, and reach your goals. This is all going to be pretty exclusive to my process and everything that I do, so if that doesn't work for you, that's totally fine. Everyone has their own methods. So I procrastinate like any human. I have stretches of time where writing is really difficult, but at the end of the day, writing is what I want to do. The writing industry is extremely unforgiving, and there's honestly no guarantee of success if that's what you want to do. That means that it's up to you to do everything that you possibly can to get yourself to where you need to be. Another thing is I don't recommend going into writing to make money. It's great if you do. You need to go into it because writing is what you love to do, because that is going to be your motivation more so than anything else. Now, obviously it's going to be easier to create if you have more time to devote to it, but that's not going to be the case for a vast majority of writers. Most people are going to have to balance jobs, kids, school, etc. with their writing. So I'm going to do a rundown of how I managed while I was working. And I'll also go over what things are like now that I am at home and writing full time. So as I said in my previous video, I didn't start writing seriously until I had already finished university. So I don't really have anything specific for while you're in school and trying to write a book, but some of this should be applicable to that as well. I find that if you are able to write at work, not necessarily while you're supposed to be working, but the fact that your breaks at work are usually quite regimented, depending on the job that you're in, it lets you plan to write over your coffee break, over your lunch break, over whatever. So the first job that I worked was in a seniors lodge, and I stayed there for about 7 years, so I worked there all through university and a few years after that. The only shifts there that I could get any writing done was when I worked the evening shift, which was usually 3:30 to 11:30. Pretty much by 8 o'clock, all the seniors were in bed and there was only one other staff member on. And at the time I worked in housekeeping, so I had a lot more free range with where I had to be at what times versus when I worked in the kitchen. So basically, I would bring my laptop to work and I would use my coffee breaks and my lunch or my dinner breaks to get my writing done. If I was ahead of things or if I had an idea or a line in my head, I would take literally 30 seconds to just write it out. I also used my laptop for music while I was folding laundry and doing that kind of stuff. And so it was very easy if I had an idea to just move from my laundry pile over to my laptop, type out a line, go back to work. And honestly, even if you're only writing a minute or two at a time, you're still writing. You are still getting words down on the page, and that made a huge difference in getting things done. And at that point in time, I was just working on my first book, Olympian Confessions, Hades, and Persephone, and it was hard. It took a very long time. It took me about 4 years to get my first book done. And part of that was because I had no idea what I was doing, and part of it was just I was so much busier and I hadn't learned how to manage my time the same way. So when I worked at this first job, I was walking to and from work. We were and still are a one-vehicle household, so where I worked was pretty much dependent on that. When I worked at the later lodges, because we only had one vehicle, it ended up with us getting up at basically like 5:36 in the morning. My husband would drive me to work, drop me off, go to his job for the day, and then pick me up afterwards. So I had some downtime, usually an hour or more before I started my shift. We had lockers at those jobs, so I would just take my laptop with and then lock it away when I had to go and start my day. But it made things really easy to get a lot of writing done in a pretty short time span. My lunch breaks and coffee breaks at those ones were basically a luxury. They did not often happen because we were quite understaffed at one of them. And it just, the only time I would have to write was basically in the morning. And because I was getting up so early and I was working a very physical and mentally demanding job, I was pretty much out of commission for most of the evenings. I couldn't nap because then I wouldn't be able to fall asleep later, and then I would be extra screwed the next day. So I basically was just exhausted for my entire evening, so I really relied on that time in the morning to get my writing done. When I stopped working in senior care, I transferred to insurance, and that put me in an office job, which made getting writing done so much easier. In the insurance job, lunch hours were much more a given, and so I basically viciously guarded my lunch hours. That was my writing time, and unless there was an event or I was drowning in work and wanting to cry, I never worked through my lunch hour. I always would stop work, write at 12, grab my food, come back and write for 40-45 minutes every day of the work week. And that adds up really fast. It took me 4 years to finish my first book, and in the time that I was at the insurance company, which was 3-ish years, I completely finished my second book, Olympian Confessions Hera, and I also completed the first draft of my historical fiction, which is currently sitting on the back burner, but not the point. The point is that I finished 2 books while I was working at this job just from focusing on my lunch hours. And it was a little easier to get time in the evenings with that job, but it was also very mentally demanding, so I wasn't always at a point where I wanted to or was able to write in the evening. But I never really felt bad if I couldn't, because I knew that I had that time carved out every workday to do what I had to do. Another trick that I did while I was working on my historical fiction was my very first group of beta readers for my draft 1 were my work friends. And so there was a lot more motivation when your readers are staring you in the face multiple times a day and they're asking for more chapters. So that helped a lot with motivation and planning out my time. Now I'm home and I write full time. I've been doing this for about a year now. And in that time, I finished the second draft of my historical fiction, got through the whole beta reading process for it, and I've also finished the first and second draft of my contemporary romance. The 2 things that are my secret weapon for that, because again, I am bad at procrastinating and getting distracted and all that jazz that people do. So what I did was writing sprints and to-do lists. With a to-do list, it really helps keep you organized because it's so much more difficult to forget that you have to do something when it's right there in front of you. I would use agendas. I would have lists in notebooks. I'm still a little bad at following to-do lists, but I am significantly better than I used to be. But I do know when I am not using them, my productivity tends to decline. They are much more useful when I have multiple things on the go. So if I have to follow up with beta readers, if I have to do a marketing thing, whatever, anything that is not just writing, I have to put on a to-do list, otherwise it kind of just falls out of my head. Writing sprints are so good. I know they don't work for everyone, but personally they are a godsend for me. So a writing sprint, for anyone who doesn't know, is basically you set a timer, you write as much as you possibly can in that time. And it helps a lot if you have other writer friends or some kind of writing community, and you can do sprints together, make it like mini competitions basically. Usually they are 15 minutes, but you can pick really however long you want, even if it's just 5 minutes. Regardless how much you get done, it's going to be more words than you had before, and those little bits are going to add up. Another option that you can do if you have other pressing matters is to alternate your sprints. So do 15 minutes of writing, 15 minutes of cleaning the kitchen or folding the laundry or whatever. Alternate your writing with other things that you have to get done so you don't feel guilty not getting stuff done while you're writing, but you still have that mental break in between writing. So if you get distracted easily or you get overwhelmed by other things you have to do, then this can be a good method. I also find it works really well with writer's block. Because you are under a time limit, you basically just word vomit onto your page, and usually within that is some kind of gold nugget that will help you get over your hurdle and keep writing. Obviously not every single time, but the way to get over writer's block is to write, and writing sprints are a really good way that I use to make myself do that. When I first started writing books, I basically knew nothing. I don't know that it's ever possible to know everything because the industry changes constantly. But the more you do this, the more comfortable you're going to be with the whole process that goes along with creating a book. There's so much more to it than writing, and I thought, when I first started writing, I thought that the writing was the hard part. And spoiler alert, it's not. Building and maintaining your author platform, marketing, all these tons of other pieces that go along with it can be very overwhelming and a lot of work. But they're things that have to get done if you want writing to be a career. If you have questions about building your platform, then I would highly, highly recommend Jenna Moressi's class on Skillshare. I will put a link in the description below. I'm not going to go into any detail about this particular topic because honestly, everything I know about it comes from her class. When it comes to goals, it's going to depend on what you want to get out of your writing. If you're doing it just for funsies, for a hobby, for stress relief, then basically the pressure is off. If you want to do this for a career, then you're going to have to light a fire under your butt. Your goals need to be specific, measurable, and attainable. You don't want a huge, giant goal that just overwhelms you and stresses you out that you're not going to be able to reach anytime soon. If your goals are specific, then it becomes much easier to figure out what you're going to do to achieve them. Say you have a goal to write 15 minutes a day. That's a very specific goal. It's small, so it's attainable, and it's very easy to measure whether you've accomplished that or not. If you need to split up that 15 minutes into 5-minute increments, then do that. And if you're able to do more, then do more. The point is to get as consistent as you can. And if you're not writing every day, then it really helps to have something else involved in the process that you're doing every day. Whether it's maintaining your platform, engaging with other writers, something that is going to move you forward in this process is essential. There's also nothing stopping you from changing your goals. If you find that one is just not working for you, change it. Sometimes I'll make word count goals. Sometimes it's just to finish a chapter. Sometimes it's spending a specific amount of time writing. Really, whatever method is going to work for you is the one that you need to employ. If you need a reward system, do that. I don't generally implement them, but that's just a personal preference of mine. In terms of motivation, honestly, my motivation is that I want to get a book out. I love writing. I love the stories that I'm telling, and that is my motivation. I don't need rewards. I don't need pats on the back. I enjoy the writing process, and that is what gets me writing. I would recommend that you make things as easy on yourself as possible. Now, whether that involves carrying a laptop around, having specific apps on your phone, or carting around a notebook, it lets you steal writing time, it lets you keep up with your platform, and everything else that you have to steal time for to make this happen. I don't personally recommend handwriting your stories, simply because you're going to have to type that up later, and that is more time. But you do what you gotta do. I don't handwrite, mostly because I have issues with my wrists and other joints, and so handwriting after like 2 minutes can be really painful for me, so I only type. I don't waste any of my time handwriting it unless it's absolutely necessary. My phone is at 0 charge, and I have ideas that need to get down. But otherwise, I am exclusively computer-based for pretty much everything. It's great if you can devote huge chunks of time to your writing, and I know not everyone can do that. The important part is to carve out writing time whenever you can. You need to plan ahead and talk to those closest to you. If you have a partner or a roommate, let them know when your writing time is so they can plan around it, you can plan around it, and you have someone holding you accountable. Set timers, set reminders, mark up your calendar, anything to prompt you to sit down and do what you need to do to get this book made. And at the end of the day, if you're not getting words on the page, your book's not going anywhere. It doesn't matter how much marketing you do, how big the rest of your platform is. If you don't write your book, you got nothing to give them. That's all I've got for you today. Thank you so much for watching. All my social media links will be in the description below, as well as a link to Jenna's Skillshare class. This topic was requested by MG Comics, who is one of my YouTube subscribers. Thank you so much for that. If you guys have any topics you would like me to cover, feel free to send me a note on my social media or comment on any of my videos. I will see you all next week with another video. Bye!